Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast with your hosts Griffin Palmer, CJ Hickman, Jason Cabrera, and Ryan Mitchell.
I feel like this is the second time I've started the show. It is the second time. The second time in way too recent history. I'm having a new type of monster. As one of the listeners wrote in and said that, oh, you have to try this one. I don't remember if it was on Twitter, on YouTube. The clear monsters, and I actually found one. Hydro is what it's called. It's like energy water.
Hydro.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. I don't think it's my favorite, but I like it. It's pretty interesting. So, yeah, if you see,
if we don't get some sort of sponsorship from Monster, I'm gonna be very surprised.
I know. I just really like them. It's this clear plastic bottle. It's squishy. It's weird. I don't know what to think. It's kind of throwing me for a loop, but not carbonated at all either. It's weird. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the show, everybody. So this is the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast. It is Tuesday, July 12th, and welcome to the show. Of course, I'm your host, Griffin Palmer. A little derailed by my drink that I have here, and of course, I am joined by my co-host, Jason Cabrera. What's up, Jason?
How's it going, man? It's quieter than usual today.
It's so much. No, it's not just quieter. It's much more peaceful than normal. So for those of you probably could have guessed, as I mentioned, it's just the two of us. Ryan, we don't know where Ryan is, but CJ has elected not to join us this evening. I guess he had better things to do, so we're going to do our best to take pot shots at him all night long, so that's kind of half the fun. Or morning. I guess, what do we even say? Because, spoiler, if you're peeling back the curtain, it's 2 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast right now, and that's when we're recording, so we can get this out to you guys today, because it is Friday's show. Or not Friday's show, this is, oh man, I'm so turned around. This is Tuesday's show.
It's Tuesday's show, yeah.
I know, maybe I need to drink more of this drink, but yeah, I think
you need more Monster.
Yeah, so either way, we record super early in the mornings, so not all the time it's doable for everybody's schedule, so, it is what it is. Sure. But we do have an amazing show for you guys today. Today we're going to be taking a look at many of the different fantasy football formats there are out there in the world. Couldn't possibly cover them all because, somewhere out there's going to be some little side website, nook and cranny, different way of doing things, but we're going to cover a vast majority of them. We're going to, of course, bring you all the top headlines from around the league, all of that. Remember, if you guys want to check out our website, thefantasyfootballfanatics.com, by the time you are listening to this show, all of the up-to-date rankings for the offensive position should be live. If not, they'll be coming up soon. If you guys want to support the show, lots of ways you can do that. You can join the community on Twitter at the FF Fanatics, easiest way to get a hold of us, submit your questions, all of that good stuff. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. If you want to get a much more in-depth advanced show, a bonus show every single week, head over to patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. Help support the show, keep the lights on, help us keep doing what we are doing, and of course we give you all types of cool rewards over there, so would highly recommend checking that out. And of course the most important bit of news, and we've been getting a lot of good feedback thus far, I'll start putting some of these reviews on the show. If you guys want to play against Jason, myself, CJ, Ryan, the gang, if you want to play against us, if CJ decides to show up, if you want to play against us in fantasy football for the 2017 season, our listener league spots in our listener league are now up for grabs. All you have to do is head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, and you are automatically entered to win a randomly selected spot in our fantasy football listener league. So, again, rating, review, just at the end of the review, make sure you guys leave us your Twitter handle, email that we can reach you, something like that. So if you do win, we can get a hold of you. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Randomly selected.
I know there's a bunch of guys out there that like to say stuff on YouTube, and I know CJ would be loving to say something about this right now. And you guys think you know more than us? Prove it. Prove it. Come to us and prove it. Let's see what you got.
Bring it on. And we have, obviously...
Bring it.
Don't want to just shout out to the YouTube crowd. That's where we got our start. They make up less than 1% of our viewing audience. So, anyone in the world, okay. We get a lot of good feedback on Twitter as well. So we say, bring it. Head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review. You're automatically entered for a chance to be randomly selected to play against us in 2017. So, with that all being covered, all the bookkeeping aside, let's move on to our warm-up question of the day. Now, this is a question that we've been asked. We've got a handful of people asking us this question so far, so I figured it'd be fun to talk about on the show. And it is, what is one player that you are kind of ashamed to be as high on as you are? Possibly someone who shocks you that they're as high up in the rankings as you have them. Did you want to go first, Jason, or you want me to go first? Because it's just the two of us. We can be diplomatic about this.
Okay. I'll go ahead and go first.
All right.
I'm sure I'll get a lot of outrage for this one because I know there's a lot of fans of this team and a lot of fans of this particular
Most
player.
popular franchise in the league.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, and I am not a fan of Dez Bryant. I have never been a fan of Dez Bryant. He, to me, is inconsistent. There's games where he just drops the ball when you need him to catch it, and So for me, Dez Bryant's my guy. I got him at number 9, which I know a lot of people probably think is already too low, but for me, I think that seems high, but I can't seem to get him out of the top 10, and still call myself a legitimate analyst.
I mean, that's fair.
Oh.
Fun fact, he was 1 pick away from joining the Baltimore Ravens in 2010's draft. Just saying. I would like him a lot more if he was a Baltimore Raven. But regardless, he's a guy who we actually both have evenly ranked, but for different reasons. You're trying to get him down. I'm trying to find ways to get him up because once he got back from injury last year, he was on a really high pace. And I expect Dak Prescott to take that next step in his development. I think that, obviously they're going to be in more shootouts this year. So I think he has an opportunity to get back to his form that made him such a household name back in 2013, 2014. But, it could easily go the opposite direction, the way it's been in 2015, 2016. Inconsistent injuries, the works. So I get it. Yeah. I totally get it. My guy is a guy who single-handedly sunk a number of my leagues last year, including our league of record, and that is one Davante Adams. And I know we always preach you can't blame one person in particular. It's the whole team effort. But I know a lot of people who experienced this with me last year, where he had not 1, but 2 wide open receptions in the end zone. No one around him. Drop the pass. So, that was all I needed, was him to catch one of those to advance into our Super Bowl in our League of Record, where I did outscore you that week, Jason. But, of course, it was not to be. You are the league champion this year, and kudos to you. Any given Sunday. That's the way it is.
Thank you.
But, Davante Adams, he is a guy who I am annoyingly high on this year. He's a guy who I'm kind of expecting to take that next step. I have him advancing in targets, receptions, and yardage, because he's establishing himself in that offense. I mean, it's not his 3rd year, but he's had a couple years to really grow. He's been making leaps and bounds. He is on an offense that will support 2 wide receivers. We've seen it many, many times in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. Randall Cobb seems to have kind of taken a step back, though he could always step forward. And yes, there's all the Martellus Bennett talk, which is possible. But it's also possible that Jordy Nelson takes a step backwards this year, and then some of that volume has to be spread out. Davante Adams seems to, at least at the end of last year, solidify that number 2 wide receiver role. Probably therefore going to be the main beneficiary. So it could go a lot of ways, and just the way I have him statted out in my stats, we were talking about this before the show, I have him kind of conservatively ranked. I have him, like I said, going up in these fields, not terribly, going down just a little bit in touchdowns, and he still finishes as my wide receiver 11 right now. And it disgusts me a little bit because I have been burned not once now, but twice by Davante Adams. I swore him off, and then I ended up picking him up again last year with Randall Cobb being garbage. And, of course, A.J. Green going down, which that was unfortunate. So, Davante Adams, I am incredibly ashamed to be as high on you as I am, though I think that he has the potential and the opportunity to deliver on this value. So we shall see. With that, let's go ahead and move on to our top headlines from around the league. Not, it's this time of year. There's not a lot to get to, but a couple things that caught our eye. For starters, the Carolina Panthers head coach Ron Rivera said that the Panthers want Cam Newton to run less and get rid of the ball more quickly. Duh.
It's just bad. It's just bad. I understand what they're trying to do. I get it. I understand they're trying to protect their quarterback. But that is what makes him who he is. You try to take that away from him, and you're basically going to have to redo this entire offense.
True. I mean, it comes down to, the difference between real-life football and fantasy football. I mean,
right.
we all like the running quarterback. The mobile quarterback gets you those bonus points, which is, that's great. But in real life, he's another year older. Cam Newton, they just paid the man a massive contract, 5-year, $103 million. They're trying to protect that investment. And, as he gets older, he got lit up a lot last year. He was dealing with injury. Obviously, he's still coming off shoulder surgery, dealing with concussions, all of that. They're trying to take the ball out of his hands, protect him, protect the franchise. And this is not shocking news either. This is what we've all been expecting this entire year. I mean, ever since they drafted Christian McCaffrey with the number 8 overall pick, we all expected them to have. You don't invest that highly in a guy to not use him. And the way Christian McCaffrey plays, especially behind Jonathan Stewart, which is still in Carolina, going to be probably the lead north-south runner, the main first, second down back, they are going to have to be creative. And so every analyst in the world was expecting this to be the way they did things. They're going to take the ball out of Cam Newton's hands. They don't want him to get hit. Their offensive line is suspect. They already have their north-south runner. So what are they going to do? A lot of dink and dunk, short to intermediate passing, because Cam Newton, and we've talked about this extensively, he is not that prototypical pocket passer. He doesn't have the accuracy. He doesn't have the ball delivery. I mean, his MVP season aside, very low percentages across league averages in many of those fields. His great success really came from his mobility and the threat of his legs, which is what created openings. And when you're taking that away from him, that really sinks that upside. So this is what we've all been expecting, that they're going to do a lot of short to intermediate stuff, crossing routes, hooks, curls, all of that stuff. Christian McCaffrey used probably in a lot of those situations out of the backfield. So again, this is just confirmation on something we've all been anticipating. So now we have something to back up the claims. Let's see. ESPN's John Keim. He reports that Keim. All right, I got it. Reports that a long-term deal between the Washington Redskins and Kirk Cousins remains a long shot. Oh, Jason, I believe you had some strong words. This is actually one of the few times I wish that CJ the Hitman Hickman was here, because he always has strong words for his divisional rivals, being an NFC East fan.
Oh, I'm sure he would.
Yes,
I'm sure he's loving this. I'm sure he's sitting back going, good.
Yeah.
Continue to be stupid.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, I don't like throwing shade at any football team, any specific football team, but come on, Washington. Come on. How hard is it to find a franchise quarterback in this league? Okay, how hard is it to do that? I'm a Cardinals fan, and for years, we had a revolving door in that position. We had 7 starting quarterbacks over the course of 3 years. That is ridiculous. It is awful, and that's what happens when you don't have someone you trust. Kirk Cousins threw for almost 5,000 yards last year.
Mm-hmm.
What else does he have to do to prove that he's the guy? What does he got to do? So yeah, I'm sorry, but this Washington front office needs to get their act together. They need to figure out what they got, and they need to pay the man.
Well, they are paying the man. They're paying him a lot of money.
Yeah. And this is not exactly breaking news from John Keim, because if they were going to get a long-term deal with Kirk Cousins, they would have done it before they had to franchise him twice.
Yeah, and of course there are all these talks about how they're going to franchise him possibly a third time, which would get him, what did I hear? It was going to get him well over $30 million next year if they were to do it a third year in a row, because you get paid in excess of the top players of the position.
Amazing.
I mean,
it's amazing. If you don't trust the guy, trade him, get him out of there, move him, and get somebody else. But goodness gracious, you're spending so much money on a guy that you don't see as your future.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing?
Kirk Cousins, he had 606 passing attempts last year. That put him 6th in the league. And of course, we're also talking, obviously fantasy football, not real life, but fantasy football is stats driven. And yes, everyone says, oh, the eyeball test, oh, the big situations, oh, the letdowns at the end of games. Well, like you said, finding a franchise quarterback is not easy. Look at what happened with RG3. You think they would know firsthand that they have to lock down when they have something that's serviceable. We paid in Baltimore, of course, I'm a big Ravens fan. We overpay the crap out of Joe Flacco, which, granted, he's great in the postseason. He won a Super Bowl MVP, and all of that just went to go with the fact that he's still one of the top paid athletes in the league. Is he an elite quarterback? That's the debate. Do I put him? I mean, does anyone draft him for fantasy? Not unless it's a 2-quarterback league, and that is a big thing right there. Of course, he one of the highest volume passers, but they're not quality volume, and he doesn't have great weapons, so it's bad. But Kirk Cousins for fantasy and finished as the quarterback 5 last year. So I mean, stats wise, it's all there. Like you said, he finished just under 5,000 yards. Holy crap! Come on.
Absolutely, and the fact that you've got someone on your team who you could make an argument for being elite, whether or not it's a decent argument or not.
Enough said.
That's a good thing. I mean, yeah, right, exactly. Look at San Francisco. Do they have someone that you could say is elite right now? Not even close.
They're waiting.
Not even close.
San Francisco is waiting for Kirk Cousins to hit the open market. Kyle Shanahan.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Oh, yeah. Kyle Shanahan wants Kirk Cousins back bad. And Kirk Cousins wants to play for Kyle Shanahan. So as soon as they're not willing to franchise tag him, if they don't get a job done, he's going to be in San Francisco so fast. So, this is not shocking news. This is what we were all kind of expecting and what we've been hearing all offseason, that a deal is most likely not going to get done. It's going to come down to next year, probably going to hit free agency if he doesn't get franchise tagged again. I would honestly be surprised if anything else happens. So we shall see.
Yeah.
Obviously, being in the Baltimore, Washington area, I know a lot of Redskins fans, and they're all as frustrated with this as anyone else around the league is. So, what are you going to do? Let's move on to some running back news where Todd Gurley said that he is, quote, loving the new team's offense under Sean McVay. So again, this isn't really news per se, but this is what we were talking about even as recently as last episode, where we all expect to see better things with Sean McVay instead of Jeff Fisher. Todd Gurley, we all said, is a very, very talented player on a very bad offense. So, if this new offense is playing well to Todd Gurley's strength, and they've done some serious effort to try. Well, it's not a great free agency or draft for offensive linemen, but they did what they could to try and upgrade that offensive line a bit, trying to spread the ball out, whatever the case may be, to get Todd Gurley not hit behind the line of scrimmage as much. He could easily, therefore, start returning on value. As we've talked about previously, he's a guy who's going as a late quarterback one, late running back one, early running back two, depending on certain leagues. So, definitely a guy to watch. I mean, if he's loving it, that's good news. Currently going as exactly the 6th pick in the second round, is the 11th running back on average draft position. So, something to watch. A guy you could possibly get in the second round if you go wide receiver early, or an upside guy if you want to go running back. 0 wide receiver is a thing. We're not going to be talking about that very much today, but hey, that's a thing, just like 0 RB was. So we always say be fluid, but there's perks to every strategy. That's just the way it is. So with that, that's really all the news that there was. We've been through the warm-up. We've been through the top headlines. Let's go ahead and get into our topic of the day. And there's a lot to talk about. We're getting into our alternative fantasy football formats. Now, these formats, we kind of went across the internet, and we found format changes, drafts changes, basically everything we could think about. And I'm sure we forgot some stuff. Please comment down below if you're on YouTube, or send us a message on Twitter, and other stuff we'll be happy to talk about in future episodes. And we're not going to be diving incredibly in-depth trying to talk about strategies and counterpoints and things that we can do for each one of these, because we have so much to get to today. But we are going to do some follow-up episodes in the coming weeks, breaking down some of these much more common things. Obviously, for starters, with different formats, we talk about standard, half-point. This is a funny argument people get into. You shouldn't call it half-point PPR, because that's the first P, so it's half PPR. Whatever, I don't care. You guys know what we're talking about. Standard, half PPR, and PPR.
Half-point PPR.
Exactly. These are all very standard things that every fantasy website and every fantasy podcast goes into on a daily episode basis. So, not much to talk about here. Obviously, the most important thing is that you need to know what scoring format you're in, because that will dictate who you need to target. Obviously, if you're in a full-point PPR, the boom-bust guys take an extra step backwards, because the high-volume guys take an extra step forward. Pass-catching running backs get a lot more value. PPR, it's possible that you can get running backs, which will outscore some of the higher-end quarterbacks. Look at David Johnson last year. Holy crap. So it's important to know your scoring format, because that will dictate the way that you need to set your rankings. And I know I'm going to at least put my rankings up, so you'll be able to see my difference between standard, half-point, and full-point PPR. I'm not sure if we're going to be getting our consensus rankings completely up. I have to figure that out for you guys. But we'll get to that. Anyway.
You mean for PPR?
Yeah. Because obviously our consensus rankings on the website right now are all for standard, and that's just because that's what 90% of people out there do. I know everyone says that PPR is becoming the new norm, and that's great. I love PPR. I love half-point PPR specifically. That's my ideal scoring format. But, a standard league on every website, really, except for ESPN, is, at least the major ones, is standard format, no points per reception. So again, this is something we talk about on the regular, constantly going to be talking about these strategies, mock drafts, all of this. So we'll just move on. This is your typical redraft formats. Now, getting a little bit different, you have things like 2 quarterback leagues, which we haven't talked about very much at this point. Obviously, in a 2 quarterback league, and this is something we've talked about extensively as well, where I wait on quarterbacks, I wait on tight ends. 2 quarterback is the only exception to this rule, where I throw that strategy out the window because of how rapidly the position is taken and how important it is to grab these guys. You really can't wait past the second round to grab a quarterback. I actually contest you should grab an elite quarterback in the first or the second round. Grab some elite players around it. You can go contrarian and try and get a elite wide receiver, elite running back, and maybe grab your guy in the third. It depends on how the draft is falling to you. What's the thing you most commonly look for in 2 quarterback leagues, Jason?
Yeah, well, like you said, you definitely want to aim high for a top level quarterback. Once you've got your 2 quarterbacks, and what I normally would do is I would grab a high level quarterback, and then I would grab somebody that would be considered a decent quarterback to have in like a standard league. So somebody like Kirk Cousins or something like that. But then you want to, when you get deeper into your rounds and you start picking up your wide receivers and such, you want to look for possible high ceiling quarterbacks, guys that can maybe break out, and have a high upside. Look at Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. Both of these guys have had their weapons completely upgraded. They have the ability to go down the field. We've seen Jameis Winston's arm when he hurls that thing down the field. So, you want to look at those guys real hard. But what you said is absolutely right. First thing you want to do is grab yourself one of those high-end guys. I'm talking about a Tom Brady, a Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, one of those kind of guys that's a high-volume quarterback.
Yeah. In 2 quarterback leagues, Aaron Rodgers is going as the number 2 overall pick right now. So you see how that just curveballs everything. First 2 rounds, you're seeing Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Andrew Luck in the first. In the second, you're seeing Matt Ryan, Derek Carr, and Cam Newton, which I don't understand that. But that's the average draft position. People believe in him coming back to somewhere in the middle between last year and his 2015 MVP season. So it is what it is. So I would honestly, in the first 2 rounds, I'd be trying to grab one of those guys. If I'm late in the round, maybe I grab an Andrew Luck, and then in the second round grab a elite wide receiver, running back, whatever the case may be. But then once I get that first elite quarterback, I resume my normal draft strategy. I don't start looking for my second quarterback until I see the next run at quarterback, which generally, there's a gap. You'll see them go in the 3rd and the 4th round, but it's really you see it start to pick up a little bit in the 6th, but it's really 7th through 10th is when everyone else is starting to pick up quarterbacks, and this is based on average draft position in advanced leagues, and people who are used to this format. Not your league is not guaranteed going to go this way, so watch for the run. But once I see them start going off the board rapidly again, you can get a Phillip Rivers in the 7th round right now in 2 quarterback leagues. You can get a Carson Palmer in the 8th.
High volume passer.
Exactly. Blake Bortles is going in the 9th if you think he's going to resurge. I'm not saying he will, but it's something to think about. So, there are guys that are available. So, again, elite quarterback early, and then I wait. Jason, when would you start looking for your next quarterback? Because I know you're very let the draft come to you, best player available. What point is the best player available to you, your second quarterback?
Like we said, it really is when it comes to me. So, like if I'm sitting in there in the 5th round, and Kirk Cousins is sitting there, I probably won't do that. I probably won't pull the trigger on Kirk Cousins in the 5th round. I probably wait 2 more rounds, and if he's still there, then I pull the trigger on him. If he's not there, I wait for the next guy, and which on my list would be Marcus Mariota. I'd probably wait another round to get Marcus Mariota. So that's what we mean by staying fluid. I trust my board. I'm not going to take somebody too high, and that's basically how I draft normally. The only difference with this kind of a league would be, like you said, I'd be taking one of those elite guys to start things off, and then I'd be waiting until the draft falls to where I can grab one of the guys I like.
Exactly. So, all things to think about, but we're going to move on because we could spend... spend a lot of time talking about any one of these formats. So we'll keep moving.
A whole show on one of these.
Exactly, and we probably will on Patreon. So let's move on to the Superflex position. Now,
Superflex.
this is completely standard now. It wasn't the case 10 years ago, but now it's completely standard that you have a flex position in your leagues, which is generally running back, wide receiver. You'll see a lot of custom leagues where it's running back, wide receiver, tight end, and a traditional, what they call super flex, usually also includes a quarterback position. Now, a lot of people will contest that it doesn't include quarterback, and that's case by case, league by league, and this is why we say know your format of your league. But if it does include a quarterback, I adopt the 2 quarterback philosophy. I can start 2 quarterbacks. They are typically your highest scoring position, obviously one of the safest ones, low injury risk. So that if you can start 2 quarterbacks in a Superflex league, I go back to the 2 quarterback drafting philosophy. That's what I do. If not, it's just case by case. I focus on the scoring format, whatever will give me an edge at the position. And in a lot of ways, I don't even let it affect me at all, because the way I personally draft, and we've talked about this extensively, I'm waiting on tight end. I'm waiting on on quarterback, because running back and wide receiver are those positions that you have to start multiples of. And they're the ones that are therefore very hard to stream because everyone's grabbing a lot of them. So I'm grabbing as much quality at those positions as possible. Unless you get an elite, super high-end tight end, they're not outscoring most players you're going to be trying to start in your flex position at running back or wide receiver anyway. So don't let the fact that you can start a tight end in your flex position throw you for a loop, because it really shouldn't, unless you're doing something crazy like going Rob Gronkowski in the 2nd or 3rd, and then you're getting Jordan Reed in the 4th, which... Again, wouldn't recommend it, because that's 2 very injury-riddled players.
Even then, don't do it.
Yeah, if you magically wind up with both those guys, sure, go for it. But I wouldn't draft those guys.
I still wouldn't. Yeah, and for me personally, I have never ever started a tight end in my flex position ever. It's just not something I would ever do. I would hesitate to put a wide receiver in there. I normally love to put my running backs, my spare running backs in there, especially ones that get a lot of touches. If I'm putting a wide receiver in there, that means that I am depleted in running backs for some reason.
Oh yeah.
So I definitely don't look for tight ends to go in that position. But when the good thing about a super flex like this for me is it takes a lot of that guilt away at looking at quarterbacks higher than I normally would. So I would be more apt to pick up an Andrew Luck or a Tom Brady kind of in those top 3 or 4 rounds, just because I know that having 2 quarterbacks on my roster every week is going to be awesome for me, especially 2 decently high-end quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, you could really adopt the 2 quarterback system and get 2 quarterbacks relatively high and really catch your league by surprise, because a lot of people throw this super flex in there just to throw a curveball to your league, but if you're used to a 2 quarterbacks league, it just throws you into that kind of mindset again, so it's an advantage. Yeah. But yeah,
very much so.
To your point, yeah, I know, I agree. I don't necessarily strictly start running backs. I kind of take it case by case and player by player, matchup by matchup. I approach it like I would anyone else. Who do I think is going to be my highest contributing player? And based on my matchups, of course, use the projections. And I hate the projections, honestly, because they are so far from accurate. But I'll use it as a guideline, because I'll go through and I'll usually look side by side. Like, okay, I've got David Johnson starting as my running back 1. He's got Melvin Gordon as his running back 1. I should win that. And as I go down the list, like row by row, and starting to think how it would go. And if I think that I'm in a hole, I think his players have better matchups, better players, that he's going to be doing better. In that flex, maybe I'll start a really boom-bust wide receiver, because I'm not looking for the high floor. I'm looking for that high ceiling, because I need that breakout performance to maybe win that week. And that's where it comes in. And if your players start later on Sunday or on Monday night, you have the option to really weigh those options as you see the way that the week is falling to you. You can play with it. But yeah, I Superflex is a really fun thing to do. We do it in our league of record, but not with the quarterback though. We do the running back, wide receiver, tight end version of Superflex. But it's case by case. So we're dwelling a little bit. We got to keep moving. But we can, if you guys have questions about this, you again. Send us a question. We'll be happy to answer it. But I just simply approach it like I do any other flex position in any other league, unless I can start a quarterback, and then that changes everything. Moving on.
Yeah, that changes the whole shebang.
Exactly. Some alternate scoring formats now. We've covered these roster formats. Some things to keep an eye on when we talk about know your league scoring. This is really important, because this can change everything. We all know about points per reception. That's universal now. But did you know that in some leagues, and maybe you have a crafty league manager who doesn't tell you these things, you can do all types of random side things, including points per first down. So if you have a move the chains type player on your, that you like from like a team that you root for, or you just know the guys who are usually safety blankets, running backs, wide receivers, who very commonly are used on third downs to move the change, get an entire extra point for that one play. That could be a way to skyrocket. You have the opportunity to do points per completion, so you can get adjusted points for every pass that's completed on top of the yardage. You can do points per rushing attempt, which, I mean, holy crap, running backs, elite ones will rush the ball over 20 times a game. That's tons of points right there. So that's really important to know. You can do bonuses per like landmark performances. That was horribly worded. Bonuses per achievement. How about that? And that's simply like when a running back or a wide receiver goes over 100 yards, you get a bonus on top of their points that they have for the week. Or if they do a 40 or 50-yard rushing or receiving touchdown play, bonus points on top of the crazy yardage and the touchdowns that they get. So these are all things that are really important to know. There are also crazy side leagues where you can do touchdown only. Some people swear by this, and I am not among them, because touchdowns are the most fluky, unpredictable thing in fantasy football and statting guys out. I mean, yardage is actually relatively easy. Touchdowns are crazy inconsistent year to year. You can look at trends and averages, but as a whole, year to year, players generally fluctuate pretty radically. What are your thoughts on touchdown-only leagues, Jason?
Well, you got to be really confident in the player that you're picking. There are players that are going to get a lot of yards, that are going to do, score a lot of fantasy points, but don't get to the end zone. They don't find the end zone. They very rarely find the end zone. There are a lot of guys that you've heard us talking, going back, talking about our rankings, talking about different players and things like that. You've heard us say a lot of times, well, this guy doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. Yeah, you get tons and tons of yardage, but he had 2 touchdowns last year, So that is obviously a problem. That's an issue. You have got to know. And you also have to find teams that are good in the red zone, and going back to points for first down and stuff like that, teams that can move the ball. That is going to be very team dependent. You could have an excellent player on a team, but for some reason they don't go to him when they're supposed to when you get into the red zone, so he doesn't score. Or they go away from him. Or you have a guy like Cam Newton as the quarterback who's scalping touchdown runs from Jonathan Stewart. So should I take Jonathan Stewart in a touchdown-only league? Absolutely not, because guess what? He's not going to get those touchdowns. Those are going to go to Cam Newton, or now probably Christian McCaffrey. So this is where real football knowledge meets fantasy. You have got to be very cognizant of who is scoring what and who is getting what on these teams.
Yeah, and it completely deflates other players. Like, look at A.J. Green, for instance. A.J. Green, of course, he only played 10 games, but in those 10 games, he had almost 1,000 yards. That's insane. Yeah. But in that time span, he only had 4 touchdowns. So that's not a lot. And so you're getting a guy who's obviously incredibly consistent, gets the ball a ton, is productive at making yardage and making big plays, but if he doesn't get into the end zone, what does it matter? You get nothing for it. So these are the things you have to take into account, because this is the crazy curveball stuff you get if you're in a touchdown-only league. I had somebody write in that said that he drafted a team, and then he realized it was a touchdown-only league, and he had a team of a lot of players like that. And like he drafted Julio Jones, which is historically not a very high touchdown scorer and things like that. So great player. Probably wondering why he fell to him in the back of the first round where he drafted him, but that's where coming up and knowing your scoring format is essential. And then this is really curveball-ish. Most people don't even know you can do this, and it's only available on some websites where there is head coach-based scoring. So this... wow. This is crazy. This is the kind of stuff where if the team wins, if the team loses, if the team ties, you get points assigned to this. And this is all usually customs. Sometimes if the team scores any points at all, you get a point per point, or whatever the decimal that you use is. Margins of positive or negative points based on the points scored margin of the win or the loss. So if they lose by like 20 to 24 points, you get negative, whatever you have it assigned to, 4 or 5 points. Or if you win by 25 points or more, you get like 10 points, or whatever the case may be. This is next level crazy. Not that
you are going down the rabbit hole big time with this kind of scoring.
Yes. I mean, not saying that I'm opposed to this because this is pretty cool, but this is something you're not going to run across very often. I'll put that out there. But it exists in the world of fantasy football. I've played in a league that has it. It's kind of weird. And, of course, you get coaches like Bill Belichick, which goes off the board really early among the head coaches. So, those guys that win, and they get a lot of points. So
as he should.
It's stuff to take into consideration. It's weird to be in a draft and see Bill Belichick go off the board. You're like, wait, what? So,
are there a lineman?
Yeah. Surprise! So these are things to look out for. Now, let's talk about some alternate league formats. Now, keeper leagues. Obviously, this is relatively standard. We answer questions for keepers and Dynasty all the time. One of our most common questions, especially this side of this time of the year. Good Lord. Who do I keep? When do I keep him? Who's the better value based on what I have to pay to keep him? Keeper leagues are where owners, players like you and I, get to keep a number that's assigned by every league's different. Typically, it's usually somewhere between 1 to 5 players on their team from one year to the next. And generally, I mean, you'll find leagues where it's like, oh, those are your guys, and I'll go draft. But that's rare. Usually, there's a penalty. Most commonly, it is either linked to their average draft position, the round you drafted them in, or they automatically cycle up. I keep 5 players. That means I don't get to draft in the first 5 rounds. That's the most common ways that these things are done. And then people will put limitations in. Like if you keep a player for 2 years, he moves up a spot every 2 years, or every year, or 2 spots every year. Or you can only keep them for 2 or 3 years. Whatever the case may be. But these are all ways that they keep keeper leagues in check. But it's a very cool way to add depth to your league and keep off-season activities going and really feel like these are your guys. These are the guys you're rooting for. It's harder to trade these guys because they've been with you for years. Even more so in the next format we're going to talk about. But first off, Jason, what are your thoughts on keeper leagues?
Well, first off, I can tell you that in our league, I'm in another league with Griffin. It's a keeper league.
It's a dynasty league. Yeah.
There's a dynasty league, rather. Excuse me. Yeah, it's a dynasty league. I made one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in fantasy football. I had drafted David Johnson his rookie year, and I had some problems. I had to get rid of some people, and I was looking at him, and he wasn't starting, and I was like, oh, maybe I can pick him up after this week. I dropped him, and of course, because Griffin hates me, he gave someone I told someone you should pick him up, which they did, and now they have him and I don't have him, and it makes me very sad. You have got to really know that a player is going to be good. You have to pay attention to what's going on, and it also depends on the penalties that you're going to get. Like we said, if it starts creeping up every year, in some of these keeper leagues, don't keep a player when it's going to cost you higher than they're worth. And I don't mean they're where they're worth based on the projections that they give you. You need to project out. You need to look at your board and say, you know what, this guy is on my projections is not that high. I can maybe get him later, because you could be passing up a really good opportunity to get a good player. So you have got to pay attention to where those players are going. Don't just keep somebody because you like their name, because you like what they've done for you in the past. Double check where they're going to be and if it's worth it. If not, and you've heard us say it many times, drop that player, pick somebody else up. You might get them later on.
Yeah, I mean, a very common thing we say is, they'll have first-round players. I keep this guy for a first-round pick. All right, well, where do you draft? Realistically, you might be able to pick that guy right back up again and keep players in, the second, third, fourth, whatever other players and rounds you're debating on. So it's all stuff to weigh in. And generally in a keeper league, you'll know all about that. And let's move on to the next one, which is dynasty leagues. Dynasty leagues, as Jason's kind of alluded to, it's like keeper leagues on crack. Generally, the owners, again, that's you and I, they keep the vast majority of their teams from season to season. In a lot of leagues, you keep the entire team, and then you'll drop some players so you can add players off the waiver wire, players that you don't like. And often these leagues will have rookie-only drafts where they'll do. Usually, it's a 3-round draft where you draft only rookies from the most recent NFL draft. I cannot talk today, so. These are all...
I don't think you should have that monster anymore. I think you should switch to a different monster.
Honestly, I think there's not a lot of caffeine in it. It doesn't really taste like it, so maybe I'm fading. I don't really know. But
that's what it is. That's what it is.
It could be. I've got real ones in the fridge. I can go grab one. But again, and also in these leagues, it's also not unheard of where they'll have limits. Like these will be drastically extended rosters and benches. So maybe you keep only like 10 to 15 of the guys on your league, and then you drop the rest. So you've done the rookie draft, and then you'll have a normal redraft kind of process after you have all your keepers. It's case by case. There's a lot of different ways to do dynasty leagues, but it's a great way to really, really keep your league active throughout the offseason. Anything you want to add to dynasty leagues? Because we've kind of touched on it already. But what are your thoughts, Jason?
Well, the biggest thing with dynasty leagues is you need to keep a very good eye on promising rookies and sophomores that are coming up. And this is where our NFL draft coverage that we do on this show will help you immensely. Pay attention. I love draft. I put out articles on drafting all the time on the NFL draft, and we talk about it through the off season. So pay attention to these names, these rookies that are coming out. You've heard names like O.J. Howard, Joe Mixon, and Zay Jones, and all these names that you are going to want to target because they may not be great right now, but on a dynasty league, you can bench them and you can use them later when they start really picking up steam, which some of these guys are going to be really, really good. I'm talking about next level good coming up in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. So keeper leagues are like a mini version of dynasty leagues, and both of them allow you to keep players from year to year is essentially what you need to know for various penalties depending on your league and the format. Let's move on to something that's near and dear to our hearts, which is IDP leagues, which, again, if you don't know what that is your individual defensive player leagues, where instead of drafting a full team defense/special teams, DST, you draft individual players. You draft defensive linemen, you draft linebackers, you draft defensive backs, which is the standard way to do it without getting actually position by position, like defensive ends to defensive tackles, inside linebackers to outside linebackers, so on and so forth. That's ridiculous. That's not ridiculous. It's just more in depth, but it requires you to take this next level of knowledge and go a step beyond even that. We love IDP leagues. In fact, we've been talking about IDP pretty exclusively the last couple weeks over on Patreon. Jason, what are your thoughts? What are the need-to-know things on IDP without really deep diving here? Because we could fill a probably 2-hour episode talking about IDP easily.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, first off, things you need to know is that with IDP, waiver wire is your friend. You need to pay attention to that waiver wire. You need to watch these players because the defense is much, much more volatile than the offense. On an offense, you've got your three running backs. You got your 1, your 2, and your 3. You know those guys are going to be on the field. There may be injuries. There may be people moving around. With defenses, especially the way the NFL is going right now, defenses are starting to cycle their people back and forth. You've got these hybrid players like a Damon Buchanan or some of these younger rookies that are coming out right now that are going to be like that, like Jabril Peppers and stuff like that. These guys cycle back and forth, going into the box, coming out of the box, playing safety, playing slot. So you've got to watch these players and watch what they do and notice that one player that may have been great on one team moves to another team, not so great anymore because he's playing in a different kind of a system. So you've got to pay attention to that. And remember that good teams, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a good individual player score. Okay, you've got great defenses like a Denver, okay, but actually a lot of those guys you don't want to pick up necessarily because the whole team gets in on tackles. So you can lose a full tackle. You may get half tackles. So yeah, it looks great. You got 100 tackles, but you know what? A lot of those were half tackles, so you didn't get as many points as you thought. So you've got to pay attention to how it's scored. You've got to pay attention to who you're getting and how consistent they are.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to knowing the players and watching the matchups, and it's a completely different mentality. Yeah. If you're going against a team that likes to run the ball a lot, maybe you start the defensive linemen. You're always starting the linebackers. Mm-hmm. Linebackers are tackling machines, but you want to focus on the defensive line players for that game as opposed to your secondary players for that matchup. If you're going against a team that passes the ball a lot, maybe you start some of the defensive linemen there, but you're expecting a lower floor, but maybe they get some more sacks, so that's more boom-bust potential there. But the defensive backs, safeties especially, will get in on a lot more tackles. Yeah. So those are the guys you want to start for those games. It's it's next level understanding of football and strategy, but it is so much more rewarding for so many reasons. I mean, just on the concept alone that you have more games to watch, more players to be on the look for. Anytime, like, I can't tell you how much I love it. Like, I'll be watching a game where I only have like one or two defensive players playing, or I'll have an offensive player on one side and the defense on the other side. So I'll be hoping I'll be like, okay, team X get off the field so team Y can get on. Okay, pass to my wide receiver and let my linebacker tackle my wide receiver so I get points on both ends. You know, it's just a lot more fun. Exactly, it gives you more incentive to watch more games, which honestly, that's why we're here. That's why we love fantasy football, because of our love of football. So it's just so much more engaging and so much more fun, game to game, week to week. So I can't recommend it enough. It's just so much better. But you know, we can go on and on and on and on and on about IDP. If you guys want to know more, we'll have an IDP show coming up. If you want to know more now, where we talk about it a lot, we recapped a lot of the shows, and we're going to get into IDP rankings soon. Yeah, head over to Patreon, our members show. We get into these advanced concepts a lot more over there. We'd love to get into it here, but unfortunately we're limited by time. Let's move on to daily fantasy. Now, daily fantasy, of course, has been really skyrocketing for the last, 5 years or so. Of course, that's what you see like FanDuel and DraftKings. That's their most common format, where you start off with X number of dollars, and every single player has a pre-assigned value to them, which is dependent on, it's predetermined based on matchups and how good the player is, whatever the case may be. And then you have to make a lineup without going over the cap. So, and then you lock it in, and you can do anything from big tournaments to one-on-one matchups to 50-50s where half the players win, half the players lose. And of course, this is also where money comes into play. This is much more commonly, of course, with sites like FanDuel and DraftKings, where gambling is surrounding it. But you can play on other sites where there's no money involved. But it's a salary cap style selection, and It's honestly, it's a lot of fun, because generally you'll have a couple guys that you'll know, like, this is a dream matchup, but usually you have to pay more for them, because the website people who assign the values, they know this as well, because that's what they do. They're professionals. They're on that next level, so they'll be a little bit more expensive generally, but you can sneak some guys in, and then you'll build a lineup around those players. And of course, the more elite guys are consistently more expensive. Like Aaron Rodgers is basically always the most expensive quarterback, so on and so forth. And sometimes if the matchup's really good, it's worth paying up for that player. Other times, maybe not so much. But that's kind of half the fun, juggling lineups and trying to see what works. And it's a very different way, and it's much more engaging, because you have to do it week to week, whereas opposed to in a standard league, you draft your team, you set your lineup, you move on. But here you can have a completely different team every single week. Jason, have you ever done any DraftKings or FanDuel type stuff? Because I know I have a lot of experience doing it.
Yeah, no, actually I have not. I've never played week to week fantasy. I thought about doing it this year. Trying it out, but it's just not something I've been all that. I like having my whole season to plan and move players around a little bit. So we'll see if I do it this year.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's even with the money not involved, some people just don't like the concept, because some people this is my team and I'm following my team through the season. It's philosophically different. Right. It's case by case. Different people like different things, and I completely get that. I personally I've made some really good money playing daily fantasy. I enjoy it, but honestly, if push came to shove, it's not my preferred thing to do. I like you prefer the season-long leagues, but if you're very commonly, and you'll see places like DraftKings and FanDuel push this all the time. Are you out of your league? Are you already kind of eliminated? Get off to a rough start. Players get hurt. Well, kick that team to the curb and come over here. We can draft a new team every single week, and that's the kind of their push and their advertisement. Which, on that case, yeah, I get it, because you're not in this rut that you can't get out of. You can still have fun with fantasy football, because we wait all year for it. But it's different. It's very different. So, if you enjoy that, it's a really cool thing to do. And again, my recommendation is to try and have a couple guys you really, really like there, and then you build around those guys. Don't try and set the best, we'll see people be like, okay, what's the most elite group of guys that I can set without going over at each position? And it really comes down to knowing your matchups, because that's what's going to separate you in a tournament of hundreds or thousands of people, or even in one-on-one situations, because they have the entire, in standard leagues, if I have Aaron Rodgers, my opponent cannot have Aaron Rodgers. In daily, both teams can have Aaron Rodgers. So it's knowing what the best lineups are essential for daily fantasy. Let's move on to best ball leagues. Now, best ball is a relatively new thing, and this is actually a really, really cool concept. It's for the people out there who like fantasy football, but they don't like setting their lineups for a lot of reasons. It could be that you're really bad at it. It's that you always make the wrong decisions. It's that it's just very stressful. You draft an amazing team. You don't know who to start. You can't get a good feel for your team. You have a lot of players who have great matchups. Whatever the case may be, best ball takes that all out of your hands. Essentially what you do is you draft a team, and depending on the website you're on, some of them it is completely standard. Others, it doesn't. There are some that don't draft kickers or defenses. They'll have extended starting rosters. Generally, they have considerably extended benches as well, and then it will just automatically plug and play whoever had the top performance that week, and that's how you move on. So literally, the best team wins, and the best team will win the league. So a lot of things are taken into account here. Obviously, boom-bust players are much more valuable in these leagues because you're not looking for the for the high floor guys. You're looking for the high ceiling players. So those guys who, maybe they have, week to week not that great, but they have that chance of going out there and putting up 120, 130 yards and 2 touchdowns performance in them. Those are the guys you really want in best ball leagues. Also, high-level handcuffs are obviously in play here because you also don't do ad drops. You literally draft your team and you just walk away and you can monitor how it's doing. So you can't add drop in a lot of the leagues. And so if somebody goes down, therefore you have either your handcuff or this player who now has this amazing opportunity that you were able to get in a later round, which now is going to be possibly being plugged in as a starter for you consistently. Also, this is where I throw my philosophy out the door as well, and I draft multiple quarterbacks. So you'll usually see in best ball leagues, I'll have probably at least 3 quarterbacks on average because, these are high-scoring players, and whichever one has the best week, that's he's going to give me a great advantage to get a couple quarterbacks. And some people also say draft a couple kickers, draft a couple defenses because those positions fluctuate widely. And so if your best ball league has those things, you have that option. And so if you hear people talking about best ball, MFL 10s, my fantasy league, and a lot of other side sites like that, that's what they're talking about. What are your thoughts on best ball leagues, Jason?
I play golf, and I enjoy golf, and I like playing competitively. I'm going to go my ball, but every now and then you want to play a little best ball because it's fun. It's less competitive and more fun because it's kind of like a training wheel league. This is one of those situations where it's kind of like that. You get to draft high end players, and especially if you're like us and you play multiple leagues. During the football season, you're not going to have one of these leagues kind of just going. You have one of these on the side where you don't have to worry too much about it. You go out, you draft those high end guys, put them on your team, and then just see what happens. This is also a really good way for you to kind of see how these high ceiling guys improve. If they do really well for you week to week, then maybe you target them in your standard leagues next year. So I like the concept a lot. I think that it's kind of a fun thing to have on the side with your more competitive leagues.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just different, and it's a lot of fun. And this is one of those things where people will also this is kind of like daily. People put money on these leagues very commonly, or they'll have a buy-in, and you'll hear these stories about people and analysts and guys who are just like, I am in 200 fantasy football leagues, and you're like, what? How can you possibly set that many lineups? And they'll be like, well, they're best ball leagues.
Literally have no time.
Yeah. Well, they're best ball leagues, so I don't have to touch them. They're like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, you don't have to. So you drafted a team, and you're going to check back on it in week 16 to see how many leagues you may or may not have won. So it is what it is. And those people are playing it like a numbers game. All right, a couple other altered draft formats to talk about. Now, obviously, your typical draft format is what we call a redraft league, and that's a term you'll hear a lot on many websites and many fantasy podcasts, and that's what is considered standard. You draft a team year to year. It's what you do. Generally, it's a snake-style draft. Of course, you go all the way down. Player number 1 picks. It goes all the way down to number 12. Then the 12th team gets to pick 2 in a row as it works its way back to the first player again, and therefore, like a snake. There are many different ways, though, to do this. For starters, there are straight drafts, or some people say a standard draft, where instead of doing a snake, it goes like an NFL draft where team 1 through 12 picks, and then it's player 1 on the board again. This is not considered your typical thing because it gives an advantage to draft position, where snake is considered the most fair way to do things, and that's why it's considered, it's called standard to do the straight through. But redrafts, snake drafts are what is standard on basically every website. So just be aware, because that's something that completely, utterly, and entirely changes your draft strategy. I mean,
oh yeah.
Holy crap. If you have the number 1 overall pick, that pick is so valuable in a straight draft. I can't even express it, because that means you are able to easily get elite players at multiple starting positions before they start getting diluted. And every single pick, you know you're picking in 12 picks every single time. You're not waiting 24 picks for that pick to get back to you, which is a huge competitive advantage to be at the front of your league as opposed to the back. And this is common. You'll also see this in a lot of keeper and dynasty leagues, if they do a lot of redraft type stuff, not dynasty but keepers, where or year to year leagues where it's really competitive, and they'll do off-season competitions to determine the draft order, because the draft order is so much more essential here. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing which is very near and dear to our hearts, and we can easily fill many hours talking about, auction style drafting. Auction is the thing that is scared. Most people are scared to try it, but we can't stress it enough, because and less than 5% of fantasy players play auction style drafts, and we think that this should be the norm, because this takes it to the next level. Now, in a standard draft or redraft, it's your turn, you're on the clock, you make the pick, that player is on your team. Not at all how it works in auction-style drafts. Of course, in an auction-style draft, your league, first off, you start off with a set amount of money. Typically, most standard leagues, $200. Then, when it's you on the clock, you nominate a player. You don't draft a player, you nominate that player. You put a $1 bid on that player is up on the clock, and then every other player in the league, every other owner in the league, bids on that player for a period of time. There'll be a counter that counts down, and typically once you get below 10 seconds, that counter will jump back up to 10 seconds. So you can literally just keep going. This is amazing, because not only does it guarantee you that you can go get the players that you want. If you have a feeling about a guy, that's my guy, he will be on my team, I don't care what I have to pay, you have the ability to do so. Draft order does not matter at all. So this is huge, and a lot more strategy. And of course, most people contest the draft day, especially, you guys are listening. You guys are big fantasy football fans. The draft is amazing. You get everyone together. Hopefully you get everyone together. That's the best way to do it. Everyone's in a room. You're talking trash. You're having fun. You're with your buddies. But then in a redraft, if everyone knows what they're doing, it's over in an hour, tops. I mean, if you're in a larger family league where everyone's like, oh, I don't know what to do, it can go longer. But a lot of redraft leagues will be over in well under an hour. In an auction-style draft, the more people know, the longer it's going to go. I mean, we have drastically expanded rosters in our league of record, and that league will generally have
hours, guys.
Oh yeah, that draft goes well over 8 hours every single year, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love it, because it is just nonstop hanging with your buddies. We bring food, you're trash talking, you're having a good time, you're going after your players, and holy crap, we talk about draft strategies for redraft. Auction, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of strategies
within strategies.
Oh yes,
within strategies.
Having to literally be fluid to what's happening around you. Strategies to react to other people's strategies. You can the mind games in auction are insane. I love auction style drafts. Jason, what are your thoughts here? Because we can just go on and on and on.
Oh yeah, no, we definitely could, and like you said, this is our big league of record. This is what we look forward to and what we prep for every single year. And up until this last year, Griffin was king of that league. He won every single year.
This guy,
I finally dethroned him. This year, and as he said, it all came down to him losing at the wrong time.
Yep.
But the bottom line here is this. This is the most, probably the best way, in my opinion, to play fantasy, to draft for fantasy. Because, like you said, you want a player, if you're willing to pay enough, you can have him. You can have that player. Because at some point, everyone's going to back off, But here's the thing. You may not actually want that player. And we know somebody here on this show who likes to nominate players that are injured or that are, that are not available because they retired or something crazy.
Sometimes you have to test your league's knowledge.
I didn't say it was you. The listeners know it was you, but
yes.
I didn't say it was you.
I test other members of our league's knowledge all the time.
You need to know what's going on because and you need to trust your board, guys. And I think I probably say that like 5-6 times a show now. Okay, your board is your life for draft.
Yep. Set
your board, trust your board, and when you're doing an auction draft, set a budget. You know how much you have, you know how many players you need, and you know how important these players are to you. So set a budget. Do not go above that budget. Trust your budget and trust your board when you're doing an auction draft. You have to, because otherwise you're going to spend all your money, and the last 4 or 5 players you get are going to be garbage.
If not considerably more than that. But yeah, we could go on about auction extensively, and we will in the very near future. But trust us, if you have not done an auction draft, you are doing yourself a disservice. Get your buddies together. You can create a secondary league if you want to. Do an auction draft because it's so much more fun. It lasts a lot longer. Your typical auction draft, I think, lasts somewhere in the 3.5 hours range for a standard league. Which again, you get all your buddies together. Why not make an event out of it and spend some time together? Come on. Last thing we'll get to today, because we're already out of time, we can get into stuff like fab and different ways to interact throughout the season. Stuff like, well, we'll get to that down the line. But the last thing we want to talk about, because we're talking about a lot of league formats and drafts specifically, slow drafts. Now, a lot of people out there are like, wait, what's a slow draft? A slow draft is typically, it's an offline thing, or online, some websites support it, where you have a set amount of time to pick your player. And this is to go around everyday life. These are borderline insane. Some of these slow drafts, I've heard all types of things from you have 8 hours to make your selection of your player. Some of them it's 24 hours, and the drafts go on for over a month. And this is a way to, we talk about keeping your league active during the off season. Holy crap! There's also auction-style slow drafting where it's a silent auction, and you have X amount of time to make your bids, kind of gauge people in your league's reaction to players, poll each other, talk to each other via whatever social media, calling them, texting them, and maybe make that mark up. And at the end of the timer, that player goes to someone's team. And there's also auction style ones where someone makes a bid on that player, and it's been 8 hours, and instead of going up to 10 seconds, it'll go back up to like 10 minutes or half an hour, whatever it may be, so people have a chance to jump in and get it, like an eBay bid. So, slow drafts are really, really, really cool, but even more than cool, they are extremely tedious. So, it's kind of like a ball of stress. That was the word I was thinking. Yes. Tedious. Yeah, you were stressing out about a draft for like a month at a time. So, I mean, I've done it once, and it made me feel like I was losing my mind because you're just constantly checking it. But it's a lot of fun. It's just really different. So I don't know if I would recommend it for everybody, but if you're looking for something different to do, you can give slow drafts a try. Do you have anything you want to add to that before we sign off, Jason?
No. I have not partaken in a slow draft, and I probably won't because it doesn't sound like something that I would be all that excited about. It's a little weird and a little crazy for me. But if you're into that kind of thing and you want to spend a lot of time thinking about each one of your picks, go for it.
Oh, yeah. All right, well, then that's going to do it for us today. Please make sure you guys tune in on Friday when we will be taking, and we kind of scratched on the surface today, we're going to be taking a deep look at auction-style leagues. We talked about the countless scenarios, everything you can do around strategies. We're going to talk draft concepts, breakdowns, common advantages and advanced strategies, counter strategies, player values. Valuing your players, like Jason made a good point of, is everything. And you have to know what the typical value and average value of players are, and we'll get into how you can research that and assign your own. It's extensive. So we'll be getting into that on Friday's show. Please make sure, you guys, if you guys enjoyed the show and you want to play against us in fantasy football, you can head over to iTunes like we mentioned at the beginning of the show. Give us a rating, give us a review. Greatly appreciate that. That helps out the show more than probably anything else you could possibly do. And it will automatically give you a chance to be entered to be selected to play against us this year in our listener league. So again, iTunes, rating, review, leave us a Twitter handle or an email address so we can reach you if you are selected. We appreciate all the feedback. Again, helps us out a ton. You can go over to iTunes and subscribe as well. We're here every Tuesday, Friday. All of that will come to your phone. You don't have to go looking for it. We come to you. It's pretty awesome. We're on Facebook, as I mentioned before, facebook.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. You can follow us on Twitter at the FF Fanatics. That's how you get really up-to-date breaking news, especially during the season when we hear about injuries or starts and sits and stuff like that, and it's in between shows and you need that time-sensitive stuff. That's the place to find it, on Twitter at the FF Fanatics. Or you can follow us individually. I am at GPalmerFFF, and Jason is at Jason Cabrera 13. And as always, if you guys really want to support the show, get yourself bonus content, and help us keep doing what we're doing, if you like what we're doing here, head over to patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics, where this week we're going to jump right into our Patreon show after this, and we're going to start talking about early bounce-back candidates. So these are players that had a disappointing year that we think have what it takes to turn it around in 2017. So if you guys enjoyed, make sure, again, like we've been saying, rate, review. Any parting thoughts, Jason?
Guys, we appreciate all the help, all the love, and continue sending us requests. We love to do mailbag shows, or some of them. My favorite things to do is a mailbag show. So Send us some mail. You got the email address, you got the Twitter handle, you got all of it. Engage.
Yep. Email thefantasyfootballfanatics@gmail.com. And again, visit the website, thefantasyfootballfanatics.com. All right, we're out of here. Everyone, take care. We'll see you on the Patreon show. If not, we will see you on Friday. Everyone, take care. Have a great week. Bye.
See you guys later. What do you think, CJ?
We didn't knock on CJ nearly enough this show.
We did not.
Just putting that out there.
We did not. He got off lucky.
I don't know how that happened. We got too into what we were talking about.